Hello, everyone, and welcome to Out of Nowhere, where we're going to talk all things strange tonight. My guest is Lance Hightower. Lance, the host of Monster 91, a native of Oklahoma. Lance has spent most of his life in the Sioux State and now lives with his wife in a peaceful 5-acre homestead just west of Tulsa. A retired healthcare physician with 27 years of experience, Land Roots runs it deep in the rugged backcountry of southern Oklahoma. Can we please welcome Lance to the show? Hello there.
Hello, Bob. Good to see you. Thank you so much for that wonderful intro.
Hey, thank you. How did, how did you get into all this?
Oh, that's a great question because it's a far cry from, being a healthcare provider for 27 years. And so, how do I move in and transition to something like this? And really, it was just a part of who I was and my brothers. We all have different backgrounds, but we grew up in eastern Oklahoma. Our dad was in the state parks. He started out as a state park ranger. So we've always had the availability of being out in the woods, being in the country. And so, like many kids, you just kind of explore. And, when you're bored back in the 70s, we didn't have electronic games and all these Game Boys and everything and computers back then. So you just go outside and explore nature. And in doing that, we had some experiences. I had one near a garden, and I was by myself, and I saw this dark figure, and everything went quiet. It was really bizarre. And that following night, of course, as kids do, they tell their parents, and of course, as most parents do, they roll their eyes. Oh, you didn't see that. You saw a bear or whatever.
Yeah.
And that happened to me. And the following night, I heard something at my window that frightened me. I didn't want to turn and look because I knew that it would be something I wouldn't forget for life. And so I was scared straight. And over the years, I'd since kind of forgotten it, but I've always been fascinated with Bigfoot, Sasquatch creatures. I I was fascinated. A part of me said they were real, but a part of me didn't really know, even after that experience. And then fast forward to Western Oklahoma, where my dad took another job as a manager of a state park at Romano State Park near Watonga, Oklahoma. And my brother Lane and a good friend of his, after work, met on a river, the North Canadian River, just west of Watonga. They were just going to catfish, have a beer, talk about just normal guy stuff. And as they pulled up and was getting ready to unload their fishing gear, the sun had set. The moon was out. It was a beautiful summer evening. But it was kind of the evening was interrupted by a Sasquatch that actually chased their truck. And that really changed the course of my brother Lane's life. It took him 2 years to tell me that encounter because just like we spoke before just a moment ago, when people have an encounter, no matter if it's a Sasquatch, a Bigfoot, this Dogman creature, any type of creature like a rake creature or Mothman or Ram Man or any of these cryptid creatures, people they second guess, did I see what I just saw? They they have there's a rush of emotions, a rush of thoughts that are going through their head. Um but after this flood of emotion and thoughts like coming out of a fire hose, they start to calm down and then they go, no one's going to believe me. So I don't want to be ridiculed. I don't want to be embarrassed. Who do I tell? Do I tell a police officer? Well, there was no crime committed. I don't know what they're going to do. So maybe not. Do I tell my pastor, my pastor or preacher? Well, I'm not sure if that's the right thing. So people don't want it. That's a very strong emotion, is ridicule, embarrassment, aside from fear. So this is where I kind of grew the show after my brother Lane had his encounter. and we had a multitude of little encounters, but really didn't connect the dots. I said, why don't we have a podcast show? And this was in January of 2017.
Mm.
And let's talk about our encounters, and let's see if people will, we bring something a little bit different. And I actually had a toll free number, and I still have it to this day. I'm kind of old school. And
Really?
I was bombarded. Probably the first 6 months, I had maybe 10 to 15 calls a day coming in. But
Brilliant.
that was kind of how everything got started, and it took off. And I've since retired from healthcare, and this is what I do full time now.
You know, when we talk about Bigfoot, what do you think it is?
Well, I know everybody, there's lots of podcasts that have debates, and, people kind of argue over things, and it's this, and it's kind of funny how people are very certain it's this. Everybody, it's hard not to get human biases in the way, but this is just my personal stance or my belief is that it is not an animal. It falls more of a being, something that is sentient, something that has emotion. They have a language. They
Mm.
have a culture, if you will, more of a hierarchy within their culture. And how we know these things is not that we, sent someone to go live with them. That really doesn't happen. But through a multitude of encounters, people from all walks of life, all ages, from really all over the planet, telling us of these encounters and how the kind of the context of what happened, what they were doing, the eyewitness, what this creature did, where it was at, what time of year, was it an aggressive account or non-aggressive account? And through all of this multitude of these encounters, we kind of learn, and that's why I like to offer eyewitnesses a chance to come forward, because it takes a lot of courage to do that. But we learn from these encounters, not only that people are not alone, but that we can find out more about these creatures. And so I believe it's a being. It's a sentient being. Whether people want to call it, I don't, in my mind, have this premise that it is the lost link of mankind. I don't believe that. I don't see that. But I do think that it is a being of different genetics, that's learned to adapt to its environment without using tools, but it's bare hands. It has supernatural abilities as far as height, weight, strength, speed, agility, hearing, all those things, more so than humans. Um, so I just think it's a more or less a relic type of being that's been in existence in the woods, roaming nomadically for who knows how long.
Do you think it's interdimensional then?
That's a great question. Had you asked me that question, 5 to 7 years ago, I would have said, "Oh, I don't know if I can put interdimensional, something more scientific, in nature, with something that looks very archaic, very primitive, very um, non-technical, if you will." But now, I tell you what, I'm starting to be, human bias is very hard because we tend to kind of battle with ourselves when it comes to certain things. But if I try to remove my personal bias out of it, I've done so many encounters or interviews in which a person has said they've seen these creatures disappear and reappear before their eyes, where there have been UFO, UAP craft
Mm.
seen just prior to, during, or immediately after seeing one of these creatures. So, and where, and also the location of where these creatures are seen in such a unique, isolated area that's actually surrounded by a metropolitan area, highways, busy highways, um, townhomes, apartments. And so, how did these creatures, in many cases, get in these isolated areas? And so, collectively, I would say I don't know what the association is, but I am now starting to think a bit more open minded that there might be some type of interdimensional, some portal. And I know that's really hard for people to swallow, as it was for me. But now, after doing these interviews, you start to see more what I call anecdotal patterned evidence, where again, you've got people that are not related, different career paths, different ages, different parts of the country, and yet they're seeing the same things over and over and over and over again. So you start to try and connect some dots. And that's one right there with this interdimensional type of being or portal in and out that I'm starting to be a bit more open-minded to, and that there's some association.
Question from Steph here. Question for Lance. What is Lance's opinion on Bigfoot being migratory?
Being what?
Migratory. Do they migrate from?
Oh, migratory.
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a subject that gets brought up time and time again. There is some, again, I'll use that word, anecdotal pattern evidence from a lot of interviews that the 2 times of year that seem to have activity pick up regarding in a particular area that people have had some sightings or close encounters. And Oklahoma, we're no different than a lot of states that the activity of sightings and encounters pick up, and that's going to be in the spring and in the fall. So to me, that more or less, I don't want to say implies, but it sure gives a heavy suggestion that there is some type of migration or migratory patterns where they go to certain regions or demographics for winter feeding, I don't want to say camping, but more or less living, habitating in, and then they migrate to certain areas back, either due to food sources, um, and I can't help believe too that sometimes they get closer to people that have gardens, livestock, things like this. When fish are moving, when game are moving, those are food sources. So I'm of the belief that there is some type of migratory pattern in certain regions. And it may be different than different parts of the world. A migration pattern in Oklahoma may be different, say, than one of the provinces up in Canada or up in Alaska or down in Texas or South America. It just makes sense. It's going to follow weather patterns and possibly moon phases. So that's the way I look at it. So I think there is some, again, anecdotal pattern evidence to suggest there is some migratory aspect to their living in certain regions.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're right there. Do you think more sightings are in the fall?
There tends to be a lot of that in the fall versus in the spring. And I think one of the reasonings behind that is that here and again, I'm just giving from my perspective here in central, United States, is that here in Oklahoma in the fall, one of the biggest things that a lot of people do is deer hunt, whitetail deer hunt. And the season opens up in the fall.
Oh,
It starts bow hunting or archery here in Oklahoma October 1st. And it goes all through the season till January 15th of the following year. So October, bow hunters or archery hunters
yeah.
They tend to be solo hunters. When you bow hunt, you typically don't have a partner. You are kind of an isolationist. You have to get a little bit closer to your game, the whitetail deer, and so you have to venture out in the woods a little bit deeper than if you would if it was rifle season, that you can get many, many yards away or kilometers, away from the deer. So you have to get close to your game. You're using a bow and arrow, and you have to typically most get up in trees. So I think bow hunters tend to have a little bit more encounters with these creatures since it's in typically remote areas. They're by themselves. And then you also have people during the fall that love to camp. They don't like camping in the summertime because it's hot, it's
Yeah,
sticky, it's humid. So a lot of people, you have a lot of fall campers, another group of people that fall camp and kayak and fish because the temperatures are more pleasant. You've got cooler breezes, it's not so humid. So a lot of people will venture out hiking versus in the summertime. So I think the hunting aspect, the hiking, the cooler temperatures tend to, and campers too, people that wants to tent or trailer camp in remote areas. I think you have more people going out into remote areas a bit more, at
yeah.
least here in the States. I'm sure it's the same in the UK.
Mm,
And so the sightings go up. There's more encounters. But also, getting back to the previous question, I think there is some intermigration into these areas where people are camping and hunting and doing all the, fishing and those outdoor recreational activities.
there's another question here from Rebecca. Ireland's have people spoken about the Bigfoot using telepathy for communication?
Yes. So, um, excuse me. So one of the things that, and you'll hear it, a lot of people will generically call it mind speak, right?
Yes.
Um, or some type of telepathy. And at first, again, this is kind of like getting back to the interdimensional portals. When I first heard this back in 2017, I thought, again, you've got this primitive looking being, this creature, this massive monster like being. How can they mind speak? I mean, I'm trying to relate some type of technology, right? And it's just I'm having a hard time trying to make that association. But
Yeah.
after doing many, many interviews, I probably have done now about 1,300 interviews since 2017. I've seen that more, probably at least, I'll have an out of every 100 interviews, I'll have about 20 that the person will say, I felt it was talking to me, and I can't tell you how I knew it, but that it just wanted me to leave, and I almost like could hear it in my head. They'll say, I know this sounds crazy, Lance, but I know I'm sane. I just felt it was talking to me, and I don't know how it could do what it was doing. So this gets back to one of those things that I just have to say I don't fully understand it, but that because of a lot of that anecdotal patterned evidence I was speaking of earlier, there's something highly associated with these creatures, and it is a nonverbal communication. Now, are they able to? No, there's a book that's written really well by Ron Moorhead called the Quantum Bigfoot, and he gets into quantum energies and vibration. Basically, it's about vibrational energy, and we know from science vibrational energy exists, it's real. And so I think there's some level of that associated with these creatures. Um, Again, I believe they're highly sentient, they're emotional, they have a culture, they have language, and they reproduce. So how they can do it, I'm not sure yet. I don't want to say I'm on the fence with it. I know there's some association. I just don't know how they can do it or when they do it or those things like that. But I know that there's some link. I just don't know what that is. But very good question, though.
Why do you think people think UFOs and Bigfoot are connected?
Are connected? Well, it gets back to when you listen to a lot of these podcasts, there is a lot of just ordinary, everyday folks, people like you and I, that will have in a particular area where they have an encounter or, they're an eyewitness to something. They have in that same area where they saw a Sasquatch or Bigfoot, they've seen UFOs. They've seen very, very unusual lights. They've seen, in some cases, aircraft that don't make noise. There's no jet. There's no propellers. There's only lights and no sound. And there's orbs or lights that do things and take off and make angles that no aircraft they're aware of exist. So they're calling it a UFO or UAP. And so people don't know that there's any link, but there must be because they see a lot of UFOs and these creatures, not all the time, but that they're in the same location area. So it's one of those things. How are they related, if even at all? But it's just highly suspicious, and that you'll see one paranormal event and you would think and totally unrelated another paranormal creature that you're going, why am I seeing these so close together? I just saw a creature 2 days ago and now I'm seeing a UFO in the sky. It's not making any noise, but
Yeah.
it's got these lights. So I think people start connecting their own dots. They go, wait a minute, there's something here associated, but I don't know what that connection is.
What do you think it will take the government agencies to have publicly come out and say this species exists?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. I tell you, I've gotten that ever since 2017. My feeling is, and we're talking Sasquatch, right?
Yeah.
Bigfoot. I think my feeling is this. I think there's a lot of encounters where people have a very benign encounter. There's no aggression. There's just one of those. It's just and most encounters are just a split second, right? Just 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and it's gone. And I think that's one reason why there's not a lot of pictures and video of these creatures because ordinary people aren't journalists. They don't walk around. I mean, granted, we have these things called cell phones with cameras, but when you see something you don't understand, it's not natural to just pull something out and start videotaping like that. Your brain is trying to process what it is you're seeing.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think even though there's a lot of benign, non aggressive encounters, I still think, and this is just my opinion, Lance's opinion, and actually of the opinion of, I would even go so far, I don't want to speak for him, but the David Paulides, his books, Missing Persons 411, in there, Mr. Paulides really gives a very good detail on all of his books, his series of books, that there's something else going on, very, very bizarre, of why people are missing. A lot of the times it's weather conditions, poor planning, unfortunate, terrible accidents. Those things happen, unfortunately. But there's still a percentage of people that go missing for totally unreasonable, unexplainable reasons. And so it is my belief and my premise that these creatures, these Sasquatch, are responsible for human abductions when it comes to national parks. Not all of them, of course, but a portion of them, or state parks, or preserve areas. Um, and I think that's happened over the years. In addition to that, I think there is some level of responsibility of the Sasquatches injuring people, um, And so, with that being said, I'm going to say that our government, the U.S. government, is never going to come out and acknowledge these creatures because if, and I believe they've known about this for decades and have covered it up. And I think if they acknowledge this, you're going to have, first of all, you're going to have who knows what kind of, department agencies coming out trying to close down state and federal lands because there's a new human like, not human, but human like being roaming nomadically over these lands. Well, we got to shut these lands down, which is going to be virtually impossible to shut down hunting lands, preserve lands, waterfowl lands. Then, what kind of activities if you go in and you start to shut down national parks? And what kind of revenue loss are you going to have right there to shut down like Yellowstone, Yosemite, which are the big two of missing persons
Yeah.
based on David Paulides? So I think it's going to be a huge cluster for the government to acknowledge these creatures and then for people to come and sue. My loved one's been missing for 13 years, and you're telling me these creatures possibly could be the reason why they're gone, their abduction. So I just don't think it's going to happen. I think the only way it could remotely get close to some way is we have some whistleblowers, not just one, but several come forward. And that's the only hope that we can have for the government, and which department we don't know has been hiding this information from the public for decades.
Right. I'll ask you another question then. I'd like to talk a bit about the Alaska Triangle as well.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think witnesses seem mainly notice most about Bigfoot when they encounter them?
Um, the size, the sheer size of these creatures is nothing like you could be ready for. The size is, think of the largest creature on two legs that is similar to a human. Think of the largest human being you've ever seen, no matter where they've been at, a weightlifter, bodybuilder, a basketball player, professional basketball player, and that doesn't come anywhere close to the size of a Sasquatch. That could be, we did measurements on a sighting near Stringtown, Oklahoma, which is south of where I live, about 2 hours. And that sighting, that Sasquatch, we estimate was about 12 feet tall. That's 2 feet higher than a basketball goal.
Oh my
And
God.
and the gentleman that witnessed it was only about 20 yards away. It was 20 yards from his truck. It was coming morning, so he could see everything. And he's a rancher, a farmer, so he's got a pretty good idea about weight estimates because he's dealing with cattle, calves, steers, so he knows weights. And he estimated it somewhere in the 12 to 1,500 pound range. That's 1,000 to 200 pounds to 1,000 to 500 pounds. That's massive creature. So the sheer size, I would say next, as far as characteristics or behaviors, it still would be physical, not only the size, but the sheer speed and the agility of something so large moving faster than what they ever thought is the second feature. I think that people are just jaw dropped over, that I hear over and over and over.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the Alaska Triangle because I
Sure.
know 2 seasons there. It's often compared to the Bermuda Triangle. Is a region of mysterious disappearances, strange phenomena, and high strangeness,
Yes.
and missing people.
Yes, it's basically the Alaska Triangle. A lot of people are not aware that, and that's kind of how it got its name, very similar to the Bermuda Triangle. And it's 200,000 square miles of some of the most beautiful, picturesque, dangerous, um, landscape you can ever imagine that includes frozen tundra, jagged rocks, mountains, deep crevices in um, ice fields, and is home to some of the most dangerous predators and carnivores on the planet. So, since about 1982, there has been around 14 to 16,000 people that's gone missing. Some are local, some are tourist. It's just kind of a mishmash of different peoples that have gone missing in this triangle. Now, it's not a perfect triangle as we would envision it. It's more of an isosceles triangle.
Right.
And I think it runs from Juneau to Anchorage to Barrow and back down to Juneau within
Yeah.
that triangle. And it kind of started with and I wish I could recall his name right off the hand, but it started with a U.S. senator that had gone missing in an aircraft, and his assistant and the pilot, they never found them. And since then, the majority of people that have gone missing, they have attributed that to environmental reasons, because the weather in Alaska can change on a dime.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it can be sunny skies, and in 15 minutes, it's pouring down rain. 15 minutes later, it's sunny skies. So, and therefore the wind, you can imagine in the weather, it just the shift of wind. You've got mountainous regions, so the gust of wind and just the people not preparing for the unexpected. So I'm going to say probably wind or environmental reasons is probably one of the biggest contributors to why people go missing. They just don't plan on anything happening when the appearance of a sunny sky, everything looks great, we're going to have a good time, and they don't plan on something happening drastically. So I think the majority of that could be to that, but also there's just a handful of missing person cases that it's just a big question mark. Like the weather was perfect, the because you can go back on some of the weather data in that area, the weather was perfect, sunny skies all day, and yet the person just disappears without a trace. And they had everything with them. Typically, they had a firearm, they had a radio, like some type of satcom where they could talk with satellite, and yet they just disappeared. No trace, nothing. So this is where, Sasquatch, you hear about Sasquatch and
Yeah.
other creatures start getting involved.
What about, I know we talk about the Bigfoot or the airy man, as the so called.
Hmm.
What about abduction then?
Yeah, I mean, when I was there, some of the natives, they've called the Bigfoot there, they relate it to things that what their reference is. So the animal that you hear of, or a name that you hear of, was Kushtaka or Kushtaka, which basically translates into otter man. If you think about what an otter looks like, big black eyes, brown, and it walks like a man, so it was kind of the Kushtaka. But the abductions there, there's a high suspicion, again through a lot of David Paulides writings in his series of books, that there is a very high suspicion. When everything else was ruled out, could have been a weather that day, what was going on, were they on medication? Um, they had all, and some of these people that are missing had all of, they shouldn't have been missing. There was
Mm.
there was no reason for it. So, being that in Alaska there's a high prevalence of Sasquatch sightings, then that kind of, you can't help but think, is there a high association to Sasquatch and abduction of some of these people that go missing? And I think there is.
There's been missing planes going missing as well, going across
Absolutely.
that area.
Absolutely. And that just tells you, when you have planes that are the size of a semi truck that go missing, that tells you just the enormity, the sheer size of this area we're talking about. I mean, when you're from a plane or a helicopter and you're looking down on the ground and you're trying to find a speck, something just like a speck from the
Mm.
air, and you don't have a black box or there's no type of signal that you can derive from to identify where it went down, you can kind of give a rough location. It is so impossible when you're talking a 200,000 square mile range that these people go missing in. So it's quite daunting.
I think it is as well. I think there's also stories of secret alien bases hidden in the mountains or beneath the ice.
Yes. Yeah, when we were doing this show, that wasn't one area that I spoke on, but there were some other people within the same series of that season of show that did speak about it. That there was hikers that would be on these remote hikes on certain mountain ranges that spoke of just these tunnels, these man-made looking entrances to these mountains, and they describe these more or less secret bases located in very isolated remote areas of Alaska, in central part of Alaska, as well as different types of weird, bizarre pyramidal structures within the mountain, and that some of this could be observed from space, but that some of these pictures are covered up, if you will, for the public. So it
Yeah,
remains very secretive. And but that was one of the things too, that could that be one reason or association? So it's not only Sasquatch, but another premise is that there's a high incidence of UFO sightings. Could these UFOs have any association to people being gone missing? That was another one because there's a huge number of sightings in Alaska.
there is. I know there's the Bigfoot Island, the alien of Kodak Island.
Mm-hmm.
There's been sightings there of Bigfoot.
Of Kodiak Island.
Mm.
Yeah. There was a what was this? There was a movie made. It's been some time. It's been about 10 years old. It was what was it called? The fifth
Port
kind.
Lock. We're at Port Lock.
Yeah, no, Portlock.
Mm.
Yeah, that's one too. Portlock was that I gather it was a village that was quite, it was as most of the villages are around the coastline in the bays. It was a fishing village, and there was a lot of native people that were working there as this fishing community. And the story goes they were ran out by the Sasquatch, and over time, Portlock just became kind of an isolated, desolate ghost town that nobody wants to go back. And so, therefore, there's a lot of buildings and structures and canneries that are still there, but there's nobody living there. It's a very spooky, empty village.
Yeah, I think they've done another program about that as well.
Yes. Yeah. And there's been a lot of UFO movies made about Alaska towns. One was Nome, Alaska. It was, I want to say it was called The Fifth Kind. There was a lot of citizens that had very similar dreams and sightings, and the government came in, the FBI, they were questioning all these people. It was a bizarre show. There was some abduction that happened there, and that occurred over a couple of year period. And I can't recall what year that was. But it was a very bizarre movie. It was a good movie, but really kind of spooky.
Yeah. Um, a question from Rebecca. Lance, have people spoken about an owl connection with strange phenomena?
An owl connection?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, Rebecca. That's I the connection actually goes back to that movie that I just got through talking about. And if someone that's listening right now can confirm that movie, I can't recall the actors in there, but basically in that movie, um, there was an owl connection, that all these people that were having this dream, they all connected an owl. And the premise was they were really seeing a alien. Now, the owl historically has been a bird associated with satanic worship and things of that nature. If we kind of jump around but still staying on the subject, if you
Mm.
get back to the in California, it's called the Bohemian Grove, where all these politicians, ambassadors from across, different countries were to meet, and they have their secret meeting. Well, in this location in California, that one of these weird rituals they do is set this owl on fire. And so again, just the symbol of this owl has some dark premise. And so um I mean, I think owl is a beautiful bird, but I know people have used it for these very bizarre ritualistic, very dark rituals.
Mm.
And then but I'm not sure, it was bizarre in the movie, and apparently the movie was supposed to be a true story, parts of it, but everybody was dreaming about these owls. But the premise, though, was that they were really seeing gray aliens.
Yeah.
That
Steph just said it was called The Fourth Kind,
The
the
fourth
movie.
kind. Okay, okay. I was saying fifth, but it's the fourth kind. Very interesting movie. Is supposed to have aspects that are a true story and some of the real video in there, and that the people were seeing these owls, but you get the gist from the story that they were really seeing alien, but they were mentally manipulated that it was an owl. That's what I got from that movie. But yeah, owls have been, around in a lot of ritualistic, satanic rituals, this and that. But that's all about the owl that I can really kind of, you know, uh, uh, talk about, in the sense that what I know about them, that we have a lot of owls out here, but when I see an owl where I live, I don't instantly think satanic, anything like that, because, they're just a beautiful bird. They fly silent. That's what makes them unique. They fly silent.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, but when I see it, I don't think alien, but I know a lot of people that have experienced and talked about being abducted do, in frequent cases, talk about seeing owls. So I don't know what that connection is. I don't know if they're manipulated psychologically to think something non-threatening when they're seeing something threatening, like an alien gray. I'm not sure, but that's a really good question.
What about mysterious aquatic creatures up there? I think it's Lake Iliamna.
Yeah, about just in general.
Yeah, around the Alaska area.
Oh yeah, that's another feature too. Is that they did speak about that. Not so much. Well, they did talk about just a little bit in the show, or gave the implication that there might be some creatures of the sea that actually were responsible for some missing persons. Not as much as land possible beings or entities, or air, like UAPs, UFOs, but that they did talk about the depths of some of the waters around Alaska, that it could house, and they talked about Loch Ness type creatures that were more, how they sustained, possibly going through this um, Pleistocene type period, Pleistocene, um, Jurassic period, that they survived possibly because of the waters, the depth of the waters, the coldness of the water. Um, I haven't received a lot of calls about any type of sea dwelling creatures unknown out that region. I have received a lot from off the coast of Hawaii, and I did a show not too long ago about a gentleman that had an experience as a diver, um, off the west coast of the main island of Hawaii. And but I've also received a lot of calls from uh, Guam, Saipan, Japan, off the coast of China, and so and on the east side of the main island of Hawaii, the I think that's where the Marianas Trench is at, one of the
Hmm.
deepest parts right there. But I have heard there were some very strange and odd creatures seen off the coast of Alaska and some of the Kenai Peninsula, but not too many have come across my phone calls or interviews yet.
I know they talk about magnetic anomalies and methane gas pockets up in Alaska as well.
Yes. Yeah, the magnetic anomalies come really, it kind of gets back into these secret bases and these inner mountain areas that have these bizarre ancient pyramidal type buildings and structures that some of these people that were saying that they were hikers that came across this, or people. I think there was some people that were in private aircraft that could see from above or around certain mountain ranges that they saw aircraft above these areas. And it's almost like these aircraft were unknown aircraft, I should say, were hovering around this mountain. It could be some type of energy exchange where they were, if you will, fueling up. Was this a center for electromagnetic frequency or a pulse to recharge their craft? Or, but that was the premise behind that. It was a kind of a refueling or recharging station, and or a communication. Um, the mountain was a communication, some type of um, a radar system or guidance system.
Hmm.
Don't know, but I found that very interesting too. But some of these places in the mountains are supposed to be also meridian lines that are crisscrossing the earth. That at these meridian lines, there's a high level of focused energy, electromagnetic energy, and that's directed upward and downward. Well, if it's directed upward and you're in a craft that uses electromagnetic energy as a anti-gravitic type of transport, then this might be a good communication slash fueling station for these craft, possibly.
Do you think there's an alien base at Alaska then?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that you hear about a lot, but it doesn't surprise me, honestly. I wish I knew that definitively, but I'm going to say I lean more toward yes, about 90% yes, because Alaska, here in the United States is still considered the last great frontier, where it's really not inhabited by a lot of people or a lot of industry. I mean, there's a lot of people that live out in remote areas and, in main cities, Juneau, Anchorage,
Hmm.
Barrow, Nome. But really, in the central part of the United in Alaska, it's still miles and miles and miles and miles of no human being. So, um, yeah, I think there is plenty of places for unexplored. I think there's a lot of places in Alaska that are just totally unexplored, and who knows what exists there. Honestly, it's just miles and miles and miles of some of the most rugged, primitive, picturesque landscape. But anything could be there.
So have you been there yourself yet?
I have. I've been there twice. When we
What,
were
when you're going out, how did you feel in yourself then? Um, when you're going out there, think, oh God, this is a bit of a strange place, or how did you feel in yourself?
I felt small. uh, Everything, there's an old saying here in the United States when you go to Texas, everything is bigger in Texas.
Yeah.
You've probably heard that. It's just because Texas is so massive of a state and it takes forever to get across the other side of Texas. But when you go to Alaska, you just feel small. Everything is so massive. The mountain ranges, the boulders, the glaciers, the ice crevices, um, just the size of the indigenous wildlife there, the size of a brown bear, a grizzly, the size of a beautiful bald eagle. They're massive. A moose, the caribou, all the animals, the predators are massive. It's just such a, that's the one thing that I would describe as I just felt small. No matter where I went, you just felt small considering just the enormity of the landscape and the animals and everything.
There's quite a few sightings of Bigfoot out there, isn't there?
Oh
Sasquatch.
yeah, huge sightings. I mean, the some of the encounters, they talk about these Sasquatches that are just massive, massive in size. Very much like the size that I reported, even though it's rare to hear of a 12-foot Sasquatch. Usually, most people will say 8 to 10 feet on average, just an estimate.
Yeah.
But you get into Alaska, most people talk about averages between 10 to 15 feet. 10 to 13 feet is about usual, but then you hear some that just are off the charts, massive type of beings. Just, a 2,000-pound Sasquatch. Um,
That must
so,
that must be frightening to see something like that.
oh, I can't even imagine. When you see, again, you're up against something that is so massive. It's such an imposing creature to see that you don't even have words. You're just in awe, yet you're frightened out of your wits, and you're just kind of froze. You've just never seen anything so massive. You didn't even know it existed. So I can't imagine some of these folks, with their encounter.
I know briefly you said before, but sometimes you're looking at something what you've never seen in your life. You don't think about getting your phone out because you're so enthralled in it.
Right. I mean, and that's what we were talking about before the show, is
Mm.
that a lot of people, when I do my podcast, a lot of, you have people commenting, which I recommend all the time, but there are some people says, well, how come there's never a picture, Lance? How come there's never a video? And that's a fair question to ask. But the hard part to answer is that, even though we have these cell phones and all kinds of cameras now and software and everything is, nice pictures and videos, when you see something that you didn't know existed and you found out just in a few seconds that it does, your brain is still processing, am I looking at what I'm seeing? Am I seeing what I'm seeing? And what is it? Is this a guy in a suit? It can't be. That's massive. If it's a guy in a suit, what's the likelihood of the world's largest human being in a multi-million dollar suit that is fitting so well and it's running at Olympic speeds, not falling down wearing this suit?
Mm.
So the mind is racing, trying to relate what the person knows and their life experiences, what they do know, to what they don't know. And they're trying to process in fractions of a second. And so in that process, they don't get their phone out and click, because usually encounters are just like 3 seconds,
Yeah.
1001, 1002, 1003, it's gone.
Mm.
And then, so that's why there's not a lot of video or picture captured. Now, on YouTube, I'm going to say, and I'm just going to throw out of all the video and pictures and all that on YouTube, I'm going to say there's probably about less than 3% that are really authentic pictures captured of a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. The rest are hoax for clicks, for, engagement time, whatever, for the podcast show, for TikTok, for this, for that platform. But I'm going to say very few are truly authentic. And I just, I think that the authentic video and pictures, there's nothing that is going to stand out because it looks kind of it's just a captured moment. They see it and they're gone. So that's what I think. Now, again, I just, not many of us are journalists, so we don't, now people have gone out now and they're putting a camera on their shoulder like a GoPro. They're putting
Yes.
one behind them. They're getting, people are getting smarter. Researchers are out there.
Mm.
So, and that's how a lot of people are capturing these creatures now, is that these creatures are not dumb. They're very highly intuitive. They're very smart. I'm not going to say they understand the name of a camera or what a firearm is, as far as, oh, that's a Winchester, that's a Remington. But I think they understand very clearly what a knife can do, what a gun can do, what a camera can do. I think that's why they try to avoid us as much as they can.
Do you think the government have got a body of a Sasquatch?
Repeat that again, Bob.
Do you think the government, American government, have got a Sasquatch body?
I do. I really do. I think that I think a lot of the secrecy around the UFOs and UAPs that they've since the 1940s, you could also kind of bleed that in to these cryptid creatures, that they've been very good at. And again, I wish I could tell you a group, but I think it's such a deep state black operative group. Who knows? I don't think it's directly government. I think it's an NGO, a non-governmental contracted entity that the government has paid money over the years that have gone kind of rogue, that they have diverted monies into these organizations in the millions and millions of dollars. And I think that they've diverted monies to hide the presence of these creatures, the existence. But I think that they have captured dead ones that have been accidentally killed or shot.
Yeah.
I think they've captured live ones. So I think they're very familiar with the abilities, the anatomy, the physiology, the capabilities of these creatures. And I just think that they spend a lot of money, a lot of manpower and woman power to keep this secret, very, very secret, and to cut the chatter on social media, on police scanners, on all kinds of communication. So basically, the secret remains secret.
Just before we go, I know in some states you're not allowed to shoot a Sasquatch.
Yes, I wish I could tell you exactly those states off the top of my head, but I am kind of devoid of that information right now. But I think you're right. I know that in Oklahoma, a representative passed he was kind of he got viewed as a laughing stock, but it was a representative in one of the counties in Oklahoma of to have a license to hunt Sasquatch. He was trying to do it as a poke fun to raise some type of
Oh
marketing
yeah, yeah.
promotion. And I think his last name was Representative Humphreys. It was out of Atoka County, which is going to be a southern county,
Oh yeah.
southern central. And but man, that made a lot of people upset because the people that's had encounters, you know, they were like, you don't want to go out and start picking a fight. You don't know what you're doing. And so you had a group of people that were like calling him, like, what are you doing? You don't understand. These creatures are, in fact, real. You're just going to cause some issues. So, but there are states, Bob. I mean, you're right. I wish I knew those off the top of my head. I apologize, I don't. But there are some states that it's kind of funny. The state and the federal government won't recognize that Sasquatches exist, yet there are certain counties and certain states that say, well, but don't go shooting anything that, that looks like one. It's kind of an oxymoronic, kind of this
Yeah.
dichotomy. It's kind of silly. They don't recognize it, yet they do recognize it. So, which is it?
Exactly. What have you got planned for the future? And can you tell us where people can find you on your website?
Okay. Well, I've kind of rebranded myself a couple of years ago. We started out as Cryptid Brothers Investigations of Oklahoma. in 2017. And a couple years ago, I changed it to Monster 911 because a lot of the people, the first thing that they would say, no matter what they saw, was that it was a monster. It was a monster, Lance. So that's kind of why I changed the name. So right now I'm still getting my website kind of up and running. It's not
Right.
up yet, but the best place that people can find me is really on YouTube. It's Monster 911, and I'm on Facebook, Monster 911, and on Instagram it's Monster 911 Podcast.
Tell us about your podcast, what you do as well.
Yeah, the podcast basically, like I said, I've had this toll-free number going on a long time. I also have another way that people can get a hold of me is through the Gmail, monster 911 podcast at gmail.com for any encounters or communication. They have pictures or something happened and they want to tell me, because some people don't want to be recorded, but they want to tell me what happened, and that's fine too. But
Yeah.
basically, the podcast, like I said, it just kind of developed. I basically have people call in. I allow them airtime to tell what happened, what they saw. So it's kind of a release to them that they're talking with someone that I hold no judgment. I've had my own experiences. I just want to hear what happened. And so that platform, Monster 911, allows people to hear what other people have seen, and I think it opens the door for a lot of people they felt ridiculed. They hear someone else's encounter and they go, I had something very, very similar happen to me. That's what I saw. So I try to connect people. I allow
Yeah.
them to tell me what they saw under the context. I try to document it and just let people know they're not crazy, that thousands of other people have seen creatures that come out of a lake, out of the sea, UFOs in the air, Sasquatches, dogman creatures, rakes, all kinds of things, and they're not alone. And that's what I do on the podcast.
Yeah. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Have you thought about writing a book?
I actually am in the process. Um, I'm about a little over a third way. It really came about after a story when two cousins literally were attacked by a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, in Ohio, central Ohio. It was during the day, believe it or not. They were fishing in a reservoir, which is like a huge lake. And in this lake, there was these isolated little islands. I'm giving you the elevator version
Yeah.
here, real quick. And basically, they were fishing around an island, had rocks thrown at them. One of the cousins said, "Hey, there's someone on the island throwing rocks." He tells the other cousin to go up, and he throws rocks at the tree, and out steps this creature, Sasquatch, that took that as a threat. He hit that cousin in the chest, knocked him back into the water, broke his ribs, punctured a lung. The other cousin was in shock. He loaded the other cousin up. They went to the boat dock. He called every authority in the county. He called the highway patrol, the wildlife department, the sheriff's department, the deputies, the park ranger. It went on and on. The cousin went to the hospital being treated for a punctured lung. It just escalated here. So that interview that I did really started the wheels turning in my head that there needs to be a book to help people navigate whether they've had an encounter or not. They need to have a book to help them navigate what to do and what not to do, who to talk to, who not to talk to, and that's what the book revolves around. And I've got so far about 15 chapters, and I'm just into chapter like 5 right now, and I already have almost 800 pages written.
Oh my God.
So it's going to be like a this field guide, whether
Yes.
you've never
That's
had an
a good
encounter.
one. Yeah. I like that. Field guide.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be so you could get it and put it on a shelf, and then it'll be interesting. It gives my accounts and some of my brother's accounts in there, and Wiley Dave, our buddy, his account that happened in 2013 with the Dogman. It has all those in there. What got us started in the podcast show, and then it starts getting into the MIBs, this contracted group, how to recognize them, how they park their cars, what their purpose is, uh, what never to tell them. Um, if you're ever stopped and asked, what local law enforcement backdoor portals to how they communicate with these people. What do you do if you accidentally shoot one of these creatures? What never to say, who to talk to, all those things.
Sounds brilliant.
Well, I just wanted to put something out there to help people because there's nothing like this. And that's the way I look at my podcast show. I mean, in my former life, I used to help people in healthcare get out of pain as a chiropractor. But
Yeah.
now I still feel like I'm helping people get out of pain in many ways, and not just metaphorically, but a lot of people are suffering that they never talk about. They have PTSD from their encounter because some of them were very close encounters. They didn't know who to go to, and they just want someone without judgment to listen to what they have to say. And if there's any words of wisdom or advice.
That sounds brilliant, that does. What can I say? Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we hooked
Really
up
good.
again.
It's been really good. Thank you for everybody in the chat room. What give questions? It's always great for other questions besides me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think I've learned so much from the comments on the podcast show. I've changed the show a little bit and given some of the best recommendations have come from listeners.
That's great, isn't it?
It really is. Are there any more questions?
Right, yeah. So thank you again. I know you just went off then.
Yes.
No.
No.
Yes.
Thank you, and I want to thank your audience for the questions. Those are really good questions, and I'd be more than happy to come on anytime, Bob.
I'll let you know in the future
Okay.
because Steph just said, "What a great show tonight, Bob. I love listening to Lance. Please get him back on again in the future."
Thank you so much. That was very sweet. Thank you. I would really like that.
Oh, I will as well. Yeah, I'll be in touch with you in a few months to get you back on again.
Sounds great.
But you take care
You
and
too.
have a lovely afternoon. My
Yes.
guest on Friday, the 9th, is Lee Ample. We'll be talking about dogmen with him on Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific, and 7 o'clock in the UK. That's on Friday. This Friday coming, that's the 16th. Well, got all mixed up here. We're in June now, aren't we?
Yeah, I know.
It's because, Friday the 6th of June, this Friday, is my next show with Lee Ample. So
Sounds
thank
great.
you again. You take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much. I appreciate you and your audience, and I look forward to hearing from you sometime in the future.
Okay. Thank you again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
Take care.